So welcome back to Tara Institute. My name's Damien and I've been doing this month's Monday nights, and so my general topic has been about the aspirational ethics that we might possess, whether they're Buddhist or Christian or secular, humanist, Hindu, whatever ethic system we might subscribe to, or even a natural human, some sort of idea of a natural human ethic. So in the refuge prayer that I just said, this is like a statement of the Buddhist ethic. I go for refuge, which means I put my trust. I put my trust in the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, and then the highly realized people who follow the Buddha's teachings and are able to directly benefit us. And then the method is also described, so through the practice of giving and the other perfections like morality, patience, perseverance, concentration and wisdom. And there's also the meaning of the two accumulations, so the accumulation of, let's say, virtuous method and the accumulation of wisdom. So this is, I'm putting my trust in those two accumulations. And then it shows the purpose. So the purpose is to benefit others, and in a way it shows both the purpose and the method. So the purpose is to benefit others, and the method of doing that, the method of getting to that full development of yourself is by benefiting others. So there's this idea of both the method and the purpose is the benefiting of others. So that's the sort of aspirational Buddhist ethic in that refuge prayer. And so what I've been talking about is sort of like this, me being able to sit here and then making this lofty declaration of this aspiration. But the reality of my own behaviour is that there's a gap between my own behaviour, my daily experience and my daily behaviour, and then this aspirational sort of model. And so all of us probably suffer to varying degrees from this, a gap between if somebody says, what do you believe in? What do you believe in? And you might say, well, I believe in an equality of all humanity, and that everybody has a right to freedom, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that you have these declarations. People make these declarations, and so. But then the actual lived experience, individually and even as a nation, we might have, I'm not sure if Australia has any declaration of a mission or of a value system or anything, but some countries do, But then the sort of lived experience on a nationwide basis and on an individual basis, there's a gap between that aspiration and the individual. And so we've been looking at the reasons why there is a gap, and also in a way trying to look at ways to close the gap. So the last few weeks we've been particularly talking about anger as anger as a let's say a cause that widens that gap. That we might sort of believe in harmony and that everybody has the right to happiness, but then we just barrel into this really angry outburst, and in our mind we're actually trying to destroy somebody's happiness. We're trying to humiliate them or hurt them or, cause some sort of loss to them. So you can see that there's this massive gap. Now, tonight, though, I want to talk a bit more about how desire also causes problems in this gap between let's say, the, I think, as I regularly say, I want happiness. I want happiness and I want to be free from suffering. And every living being has that innate wish to be happy, to be free of problems, free of suffering, free of difficulty. And so this is something, if you're not aware of that, then it's good to question. If I say that every action in my life has been motivated out of this wish for happiness and this wish to be free from suffering, I know that initially many people think, oh, that's not really true. But I think upon examination, if you look for the underlying motivation of all of our actions, then there is this innate wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. So, and as I've been saying last week, talking about this model, the model of the way that our mind works, that there is a pairing between the object that we hold with our mind and the mind that experiences that object. So there is a pairing between these two. There's a relationship. So in the case of anger, I have the highly dissatisfied mind of anger. The sort of rough, maybe if we can see it, we can see the harming, pushing away mind of anger, and then the object that mind holds is an object that we see as worthy to be pushed away, worthy to be harmed, undeserving of happiness. So this object that we hold with the mind of anger is unworthy of happiness. That at that moment that when we have anger, let's say another person, where there's another person, at that moment when we have anger in our mind, that person is unworthy of happiness. And that's what the mind of anger is. It's a mind that is holding that person to be unworthy of happiness. And in fact, that's if we're not comfortable with using the word harming, we're not, if you're not happy with the idea that, when I'm angry, I'm actually wanting to harm somebody, that's something that you need to check under investigation. But at the very least, I think you would all accept that at the moment that you're angry with somebody, absolutely you do not think that person is worthy of happiness at that moment. So, but there's this pairing, and so this pairing is something really crucial to understand. So now when we talk about desire, we talk about the desirous mind and the object that it holds, whether it's a person or an object, a handbag, a car, a shoe, a house, a political outcome, a TV show, whatever it is, this object held with the mind of desire, that object appears really attractive. And so the mind of desire is excited by that attractiveness and wants to possess, wants to have, wants to control, wants to be with, wants to experience that very attractive object. And there's this implication that object is completely the source of happiness, completely the source of happiness. And that's why my mind wants it so strongly. So again, there's this pairing. I think if we start to understand this sort of model of pairing of the object and the mind, that there's this sort of two-way relationship between these. So the mind of desire holds an incredibly attractive object. Now, and out of that pairing, we have this expectation of happiness from that. We think that by this, holding this desirous object, this beautifully attractive object, I will be happy, I will be satisfied. So, that's something to check in our experience. And if, like I've been saying, that through our sensory experiences, touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing, if I missed it again, and even the mental experience. So through these, we interact with the world. And so, as I've been saying, that if we came naked into the world and we have this, our experiences dominated by these sensory experiences, it almost seems reasonable that my happiness and my freedom from suffering would be 100% reliant on these sensory experiences, both in a positive way and in a negative way. Right. So, and as a result, we have sort of been conned in a way by that very obvious experiential aspect to our senses. We've been conned to think that the external world is the source of happiness and it is the source of suffering, 100%. Okay, so I've been sort of saying that in a way we've been deceived by that. We've been deceived. And so we have to learn how to examine as to whether that is true or not. And there's no shortage of examples that if we start to look and we see, especially here in Australia, our situation here in Melbourne is really very good conditions. We live in very, very good conditions. Yet we have a sense of, we often may have a sense of dissatisfaction and discomfort, even though we have really good conditions, and we could say that our sensory experiences are, there's no reason to criticise our sensory experiences. Yet, instead of happiness, we actually experience some sort of sense of discomfort. So, quite a few of you would have heard about the Four Noble Truths. So the first teaching that the Buddha ever gave in Sarnath in India, the first teaching that he gave is called the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth is often referred to us as the truth of suffering. So a friend of mine said that, well, the original word that is used, either the Pali word or the Sanskrit word, tends in a sense not to mean like suffering in the use of the English word, but particularly in the meaning of dissatisfaction. So the truth of dissatisfaction. That our life existence here is characterised by this truth of dissatisfaction. So even though my personal feeling is that I'm quite happy to call that sort of dissatisfaction element, call it a suffering, but it may be useful if we think of it as the truth of dissatisfaction, that our experience is very difficult to be a satisfied experience. And so even somebody who is completely surrounded by wealth, by servants, by maybe great respect in society, fame, good fortune, maybe even affection from others, external affection, maybe a lot of praise, etc. But still, that person can be dissatisfied. And even someone who has $990 million, some tycoon or something, can be infinitely dissatisfied because he wants to get to $1 billion in wealth. And so you could say then that the $990 million he's got is not satisfying. It is not satisfying because in his mind he has this dissatisfaction of not being somewhere else. And even if somebody has a very loving companion, there can be a dissatisfaction that it's not somebody else. The grass is greener elsewhere. There's another person the unreachable one would make me happy. This one who loves me does not make me happy. We have this situation all the time. So these are all consequences of the mind of desire. So the mind of desire, the desirous mind, is seeing some object that if I possess this object, I would be happy. But the mind of desire actually has this separation to the object. It's a sort of acquisitive. It's looking to the object to provide that source of happiness. If I had this object, I would be happy. And so then the situation arises that the object becomes possessed. The object becomes possessed. And then I've got the object. I've got the object. And then all these sort of different things start to arise. If the mind of desire is still operating, then this object which is now possessed is not fully satisfying. And even if one still thinks that it is fully satisfying, now that it's in your possession, you start to fear the loss of it. You fear that somebody will come and interfere with that object, that a thief will come in the night and steal it, that it'll deteriorate or break or some other form of losing its gloss, losing its beauty. And the most likely outcome is that from my own side, it loses its allure. Because the mind of desire is an exaggerating mind that exaggerates the actual appearance of the object to be overwhelmingly beautiful and overwhelmingly attractive to me, that is not supported by the reality of the object. Not supported. And so the mind of desire, and so it's again this pairing of these two things, the object and the mind of desire. And the mind of desire creates an illusion of attractiveness and pure source of happiness, which is not supported by the actual object. And so then when we possess that object, we become disappointed, because there comes a point where that exaggerating mind of desire gets distracted, or it weakens, or it finds the mind moves on to some other object, and then you look at the thing, you look at it, and you think, it's just a pen. I thought it was this fantastic thing, but when I look at it, it's just a pen. It's just a car. It's just a house. It's just a carpet. It's just a light. It's just a dress. It's just a handbag. It's just a pair of shoes. It's just a phone. Doesn't even work well as a phone, but it's still just a phone. It's just a night out at a restaurant. It's just an act of sex. whatever it is. It's just that. But we have, through the mind of desire, we've exaggerated it to a point where we had this expectation of nothing but happiness by possessing it. But it cannot deliver that, because the mind of desire is an illusory mind that makes a false expectation out of an object. So, I want to be happy. So I want to happy. I see something I like. I think if I have that, I will be happy. So the mind of desire comes along and exaggerates the quality of that object so much that I think that if I have that, I will be so happy. I'll be so happy. And then when I possess it, I find it doesn't deliver that happiness, because that happiness was an illusion created by the mind of desire. And so when I possess the object, I feel that the object has cheated me. And so I may have some resentment. I might have some anger even. I may even have some sense of grief or loss that it has not delivered this happiness that I anticipated. So the mind of desire, I think when we look at the mind of anger is actually quite obvious to us what it does, because it is in itself a disturbing mind. The mind of desire in many ways is actually far worse, because it totally cheats us. It creates an illusion about an object, and it is just ripe for dissatisfaction. It is deeply problematic, and they say that we've got probably a fair bit of potential to subdue the mind of anger, pretty quickly. We can, like I've been saying the last few weeks, if you can convince yourself that anger is always destructive, really convince yourself that anger is always destructive and disturbing, you can make big progress in subduing your angry responses to people. I think we're all quite capable of making big progress in diminishing our anger. But it's a lot harder to diminish your desire, because it creates this illusory attractiveness to an object, and it is seductive to us. This is something very seductive to us, and we are quite habituated to this, and it's very hard for us to discern how we are being conned by the mind of desire. So when we talk about a gap between this aspirational condition, and part of the aspirational condition that we have is happy, peaceful, calm, stable me. A happy, peaceful, calm, stable me. That's my aspiration. Okay, so if we start thinking, what is it that interferes with that aspiration? A happy, peaceful, calm, stable, maybe loving, compassionate, kind, patient, open, wise me. That's my aspiration. But the reality is, here I've got this angry, resentful, jealous, proud, competitive, arrogant, conned by desire. Conned by desire. Deceived by desire. Tricked by desire, and a victim of desire. That's my actual experience. And so to understand this gap, So, you know, how do I bridge this gap? And I've been talking quite extensively about the need to become aware of this situation. You know, so anger is, I think, something we can become aware of again quite easily because it's such a dramatic effect on your body and your mind. You know, the physical discomfort is quite obvious. Desire, on the other hand, has got an attractiveness to us. You know, there might be even physical sensations, experience that we see as attractive and good experiences. But I think if we can look very closely, go in very closely, and look at the condition of the mind when it is subject to that desirous illusion, when our mind is subject to that desirous illusion, then if we look closely, I think we can see that the experience of the mind itself in that condition is a disturbing experience. It is a discomfort experience. So if our aspiration is towards peace, calm, stable, loving, kind, then if we look closely at the mind of desire, we see that it in itself is also destructive of calm and stable, peaceful, kind. It is destructive of that because it's got this very much this grasping to myself, this sort of the illusion of the attractiveness, the illusion of the being a true source of happiness, and then the grasping of it to myself is in itself a disturbing, discomforting, dissatisfied experience. So, to become aware of that experience within yourself, and then, so the tools that we need to do that are particularly this mindfulness and alertness, developing the sort of an awareness of your thinking, a continuous memory, a continuous awareness of your mental state, of the object that is held, and then a sort of a discrimination or an intelligence about that object itself. So that's this mental factor of alertness, of being able to discriminate that object. So when we do a breathing meditation on the breath, the mindfulness is holding the breath. It's actually the mind, it is the sort of the holding of the breath as an object from one moment to the next. So that continuity of holding the breath from one moment to the next is actually referred to as memory. So the ability for the mind holding the breath from one moment to the next through the continuum of time, that holding of the object, remembering the object through that continuum of time, that is the power of mindfulness. It's holding the object. And then if we apply alertness is sort of a watcher, an intelligence that is identifying, is the mind on the breath or not on the breath? So it becomes an intelligence that can determine whether the mind is on the breath or not on the breath. And then it works in conjunction with the mindfulness to say, hold it onto the breath. And the mindfulness then continues this memory of the breath from one moment to the next. So when we do the breathing meditation, we enter with this determination to hold our focus 100% on the breath. But what actually happens for most of us and for me is that I'll be on the breath for a couple of moments and then some thought my mind. So what happens is that my mind moves. It moves from the breath to some other object. A memory, a sound, a thought, a storyline, or whatever it is, but it moves. So this is something to understand with the mind. The mind is moving. In the meditation, we're trying to hold the mind onto the breath. Through the power of mindfulness, we're holding the mind onto the breath. But our habituation is so strongly towards letting the mind just move to whatever it feels like. So this distraction, our habituated distraction, the mind is just moving constantly to something new. And you could say that this again is evidence of desire. Our desire is so distracted that it has to keep looking for the source of happiness externally, another thought, a different. So if you think that, if you've got the world champion channel changer on the TV, and then there's some kid can go super fast, our mind is 1,000 times faster. Our ability to jump from object to object is so fast, and we lose complete track of it. And so what happens then in our meditation, that we start off on the breath, we're focusing on the breath, and then before you know it, you've spent 5 minutes daydreaming about something, totally engaged in a fantasy that you've built up, this layer and layer of story while I'm meditating. And your body, externally, your body looks like you're sitting meditating, but internally you've built this sort of like castles and castles in the sky, fantasy, interactions, this person, that person, a total fabrication that you've created. And the reason is you've lost the object. You've lost the object. And it's most likely the mind of desire that has carried you off. It can be the mind of anger, or it could be the mind of pride, or it could be the mind of resentment, or the mind of competitiveness, or some other thing. But I think, like from my experience, it's generally the mind of desire that carries off my mind. So we will do some meditation. So we should enter the meditation with this sort of strong motivation of the real need to develop that mindfulness and alertness, and to see that if I can develop the power of my mind and control my mind, then in my daily life I start to have a chance to narrow this gap between my aspirational belief, my aspirational ethic, and the reality of my behaviour. But that can only come by having this awareness of my mind and the ability to control my mind away from the habitual distractions. So, adopt a good position, posture, and become aware of your mind, where it is, what it's doing, and let all of the various thoughts drop away from your mind, and bring your mind in finer and finer within yourself, letting all of the different thoughts drop away, ideally to a place of no thought. And then, before your mind becomes distracted, turn the focus onto the breath. And just hold it completely focused just on the breath. So just relax your concentration a little bit and examine what happened in your meditation. So when we meditate, we are trying not to lose the object, but also our mind and the object that is held by the mind in the meditation can come to a point where they're almost indistinguishable. That our mind is so focused on the awareness of the breath, the awareness of the breath, that it's like the breath and our mind, our whole experience, are the one thing. The mind and the breath become like one thing. So no longer just sort of some distant observer of the breath, or some sort of in the meditation thinking that I am over here and my breath is over there and I'm just sort of having an occasional look at it. Not like that, but that the mind and the breath are indistinguishable, just this sort of, let's say, one entity, one experience. The breath and the mind. So the experience of the breath completely filling the mind's awareness. Not so much like a distant observer. So let's just enter the meditation again, same process, and try not to have a separation as a distant observer, but just that your focus is totally absorbed into the awareness of the breath. Let's just spend another few minutes repeating that meditation. So you can relax your concentration. And as in previous weeks, we've done a little analytical meditation. So in analytical meditation, you use your intelligence and your knowledge, your experience, to examine a particular point or a particular, let's say, a question or a view or a theory or whatever. You examine that point, that subject, using your intelligence and your experience and your knowledge. So tonight I've been talking about desire, and let's say in particular this aspect of the desirous mind exaggerating the qualities of an object. And then, so in your experience, this is the theory, that the desirous mind is a mind which exaggerates the appearance of the object. So maybe it selectively exaggerates the good qualities and ignores the negative aspects of the object, but that it's an exaggerating mind of the object. And so that's the theory. So we'll spend a minute or two examining that theory. And the way that you can do that is use your own life experience to check if that it's borne out in your experience that later on you find that the object no longer possesses that such beauty or such attractiveness that it appeared to have at the beginning. And so to see that when the mind of desire disappears, that the attractiveness also seems to disappear. So to check if any of that is true in your own experience. So we are examining this question of the mind of desire exaggerating the aspects of an object. And we will use our own life experience to examine that. So let's just spend a couple of minutes thinking over that subject. And then just return your attention to the room. So we've got a little bit of time for some discussion. If anybody would like to ask a question or offer, so yeah. So. So the question is about the Four Noble Truths. Now, what you're quoting is the Eightfold Noble Path, right? Which is... okay. You're covering a lot of territory, so well, just where are you going? Yeah. So unfortunately, in English, the word desire is got a broad range of meaning. It actually has a broad range of meaning. So the desire to benefit others is not the same as the desire for a sexual partner. Oh, certainly. So we have the ability. The question is about desire. There is no question. We have the ability to distort every action into being an egocentric sort of trip. We have that ability, and we can do that. Whether we're saving the world or, making a cake, we can turn it into an egocentric trip about our own pride and our own fantasticness. We can do that. But that's not necessarily just the aspect of desire. That is more about the self-cherishing mind than pride, than the mind of pride. So, but to your very first question, the Four Noble Truths are the truth of, let's say, dissatisfaction, the truth of cause of that dissatisfaction, then the truth that there is a cessation is possible, that it is a truth that cessation of all problems is possible. And the fourth noble truth is that there is a path or a way to achieve that cessation. Four Noble Truths. So the whole of Buddhism is pretty much encapsulated, or can be explained and encapsulated via the Four Noble Truths. Every aspect of Buddhism can be explained via the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so unfortunately the word desire, I desire you to be happy, okay? So I desire you. Oh, no, I don't mean that. I mean, I desire you to be happy. So like you can see, there's a difference in meaning when I might say, I desire you. Oh no, I mean, I desire you to be happy. So they're two totally different meanings. And one of them is the grasping, I'm seeing you as something super attractive and I want to possess you, I want to have you. And then the other one is actually something of benefit to the other person. So even though, unfortunately, in English the word is the same, but the idea is different. The thing is different. So, yeah.
and then observed how I was in that. But I'm like, how do I observe how I'm in it when I'm actually in it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the yeah. So
that's what you're doing on the meditation cushion, isn't it? You're bringing your mind.
it's what you might be doing on your meditation cushion. So the question is about, and I'm going to call the question, how do you actually integrate awareness into your daily life? Because, so the situation experienced today is that there's a discussion in the workplace or wherever it was, it's a discussion. And it became on some political topic, and there was a lot of different points of view, and everybody was sort of getting a bit angsty.
They just have their opinion. just sitting in that space, though, it was really
So unfortunately, people had opinions, you know. So
it was just an uncomfortable answer.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you've got a whole bunch of people expressing their opinions, and I think this probably happens to all of us every day. But, you know, so for yourself, rule number one, don't worry about the faults of other people. Just look at yourself. You know, stop thinking about, oh, gee, she's expressing her opinion very forcibly. Don't worry about other people, just think about yourself. The only person you can control is yourself. So you need to have an awareness within yourself.
So I did that afterwards, so I'm like, well, that's what I just brought to that. But how do I do it?
Yeah. So if you're doing it afterwards, it's recollection. It's not awareness. It's a recollection. So it's a post-game interview. You're recollecting what happened, which is really useful, you know, because it's from that. First of all, we have to be honest, you know, and that's why, like in the meditation, after the meditation, I ask you, recollect what happened. And from that recollection, you learn a little bit. Ideally, though, in the meditation, you want to keep that continuity of memory of the breath from one moment to the next and not lose it. So in an interaction with another person, unfortunately, we enter those discussions from the basis of our own self-cherishing and our own pride and attachment to a particular viewpoint. So we're condemned from the beginning to be going down a path of not listening to others and just spouting our own sort of, you know, I'm so knowledgeable, I've got all the right views. You know, my view is the right view. And so we have all these sort of attachments to that. So we're doomed from the beginning for the discussion to be a conflict. Okay, so how do we get around that thing? So this is where motivation and maybe, you know, the ultimately. We can say that the method to completely close the gap is to work from a basis of love and compassion. So a discussion like that, we normally see it as a vehicle to make me seem better to others. You know, we see it as a vehicle for me to show my intelligence, my correct view, my high aspiration, like let's say environmentalist or freedom thing, whatever, rights of this group or that group, there's sort of like sometimes an attachment to a view of yourself involved in that. An identity of me as the correct view person, the politically savvy person, the correct, there can be a lot of pride in that. And if we operate from that point of pride, then the discussion will never be fruitful. Unless you've got two people who both sort of have maybe a similar view, but they just end up eternally patting each other on the back for how good their view is. And it's just an expression of their mutual, you're really good because you're making me feel better about myself. And so there's this mutual back patting thing go on. That's not fruitful either. So in that discussion, if you enter the discussion with the thought, let's say it's with one person, and you enter the discussion with the idea of love and compassion for the other person, then what you say will always be motivated by the wish for the other person to be happy and to be free of suffering. So, and you can see that if you hold that approach, your interaction with other people will be very different, because you will not be attached to your own view. You will be not attached to some idea of what you think is right. You'll be not attached to having to have your say in a particular sequence or in a dominant way or in an aggressive way or whatever. You won't be looking for people to praise you. You won't be looking for people to pat you on the back for your right view. You won't be looking for any of that indulgent thing. And so if your focus is just on the other person, some affection and love and compassion for them, then that discussion will be very different. Still, you may not sort out the world. Like, if you're thinking that a discussion like that is going to sort out the world, it's never going to do that. But what it can do, it can be an expression of love and compassion for somebody else, in the way you interact with them. So the question is about if you have an opinion and you can express it in the way you're saying it. I have a question for you. Why do you need to express your opinion?
You ask me?
Yeah, well, you asked the question. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because we always have opinions and we are talking, so I think just the opinion to make a conversation or to express what they think, what they believe.
Yeah, I know, but the question is why?
Maybe a way of communication.
And again, why? Why? Well, this is, I guess, part of what I'm trying to encourage. I come from an engineering background. There's actually a technique called ask the 5 whys. You keep asking why, to try to drill down to the real reason. Okay, so what is the real reason that you enter the conversation?
I want to express myself. Right? It's a good thing.
Yeah, so again, the question to that is why?
So we said because it's something that might need maybe to show off or whatever that is coming to my
Yeah, and so I think we're starting to get down that when we do that, there is some underlying motivation, as to why we're doing it. And it's either pride, or it's arrogance, it's self-importance, it's attachment to your own view, and that you think that expression is something that will... But the underlying thing that I was trying to get you to come to is the thing is, because I want to be happy and I want to be free from suffering. So, but it then becomes distorted through some delusion. So if it's distorted through the delusion of pride, then I express my opinion because I am seeking praise, I am seeking some sort of arrogant stand, some sort of superiority thing or something. And so awareness, mindfulness and alertness, the aim of that is for you, when you enter a discussion, to understand what is driving you to express yourself. Firstly, to express yourself, and secondly, to express yourself in the particular way that you are expressing yourself. Understand what is that, whatever it is. So, in the discussion about, the office politics or the situation politics, if you enter the discussion with the thought that here's my sister, my friend, my colleague, whoever, they come up, you've got an interaction. If in your mind you've got nothing other than the thought of wanting them to be happy and wanting them to be free of suffering, the way you interact with that person will be very different. You may let them talk, you may congratulate them on their analysis, on their view, you might praise them, you might listen, you might merely listen without any feeling that you have to express your own opinion. So there's you can see that when we enter those discussions, we have all of these sort of drivers pushing us that I have to express my own opinion, and if you feel anybody is blocking you from that, you get really agitated and angry. It's my turn. I'm having my say. All right. Shut up, let me talk. I'm sure we all do this. And so the thing is then to look at that and think, what is it in my mind that is driving that, And I think in general you can be pretty much certain that it's not love and compassion. Yeah.
If I just continue the question, if you're in a team environment that you have a colleague, they eager to express themselves, and also in a situation that you have people that you report to, like if you are quiet, if you not express your providing the solution for the problems, then other people might see you are incapable of your job, or you are put in that situation when we are not expressing our thoughts.
Yeah. So the question, I won't repeat it so much, but the question I would ask you then, is fear your motivator in that situation? Fear. And that's why you feel you have to talk, out of some sense of fear of what the others might think if you don't talk.
But sometimes that's the truth, it's not just a feeling.
Well, whether it's the truth or not the truth, it is still the feeling. The feeling is there. So maybe you do have something to fear if you don't talk up, but the feeling is there. And that feeling is, I guess the point I'm trying to come to here is for all of us to examine the state of mind that we have. So in this situation, I think you're agreeing that there's an element of fear that is your motivator to want to talk. That you're in a team environment. If I don't say anything, they will think that I know nothing, that I am not a team player, that I don't contribute, that I'm worthless and useless. So there's a sense of fear, and that sense of fear then drives you to want to talk. Okay. Now, I would say that's not particularly a skillful motivation to have, because what comes out of that may not be particularly beneficial. So whether it's true or not, it can be the case that if you in some workplaces, if you don't talk up, people will think, oh, they're not contributing. But that's not particularly your problem. But the thing is I guess what I'm really asking all of us to come to is to understand what is the motivator in any circumstance, to be able to identify it, to be able to see that motivator, what it is. And if it's fear, then you recognise this is fear. If it's pride, you recognise this is pride. If it's anger, where you stop somebody else from talking because you don't like them, or you stop somebody else from talking because you're trying to show off to this other person out of desire, all these things can take place even in a workplace discussion. So just to understand that, and then see that these emotions like this, they are creating the gap between my lived experience, my actual experience, and my aspiration, my aspirational wish to be happy and wish to be free from suffering, peaceful, calm, stable, clear, intelligent, wise, loving, kind. So if that fear dominates you, then it's unlikely that you will be kind. It's unlikely that you will be wise. It's unlikely that you will be calm and peaceful, because the fear is driving your expression, and it contaminates it. The thing to understand is that those different things contaminate your expression to some degree. So, yeah, and look, these are complex points to understand, because this is something that, in the end, this process is requiring an absolute honesty within ourselves, and to have absolute honesty within our own experience takes great courage, and we have to develop that courage, because it is very difficult for us to view ourselves in that very naked, fraught condition that we are. It's hard. It's hard to have the courage to do that. And so we're aiming to develop that courage to be able to see ourselves exactly as we are, and then we have some chance to start to really close this gap between our aspirational vision and the reality of our own existence. Yeah.
And I'm sure you're not saying you remain silent in all situations, but you recognise the way you're saying it.
Yeah, so the observation is whether I am advocating remaining silent in all situations. Now, TT, there's some people see a benefit in remaining silent. And out of that silence, they can develop some real wisdom. So, being silent is not necessarily a bad thing. So, but if you're putting up a building, you're going to have to talk. to somebody. So, yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on developing the courage of your...
So the question is about developing the courage. I think that courage comes from really absorbing your aspirational model. Like in the case of Buddhism, like I said at the beginning, the aspirational model, let's say, is the Buddha. So really coming to be inspired by that ethic, and then the courage to put your trust. So like in that prayer, I go for refuge. So going for refuge is me sort of trying to declare that I'm putting my trust into that aspirational model of the Buddha, his teachings, that I am going to put my trust in that model. Okay, so that's a funny sort of combination of wisdom and faith and inclination. So, there's all those different aspects that we need to work on. The more we understand, the more we know, the better we are, in the process. So like this lady's question, if we can see that it's my fear that is motivating me in those discussions, then it gives me something to work on. If I don't know that, if I don't know that I'm motivated by my pride or my arrogance or my fear, then I've got nowhere to go. But if I can see that I'm motivated by my pride or arrogance or fear, then I can do something. And that knowledge gives us, that awareness and that knowledge gives us courage.
Interesting you call it a faith-based system. I guess I didn't call it
So faith can mean trust. Trust in the wisdom. Trust in the wisdom is faith. So if you've got direct access to the wisdom, then it's wisdom. The wisdom is the basis, but don't underestimate the value of having faith in the process. And it's maybe not. Maybe that word is not something that most people will jump at, but if you can see that if you have faith in that system and entrustment in that system, then you will make progress. Reliance. So it's getting late. So let's just do a very quick dedication meditation. Just think that, like these are complex topics, and I think people have shared some things that would, in normal circumstances, would be viewed as difficult to share, and so it's great that people have shared that, and that process of self-examination is really key. So this is something very precious. And that takes the form of a ball of white light. Everybody's virtue or effort collects in the form of a ball of white light in the middle of the room, and it comes above your own head and completely dissolves down into you, filling your body with light, completely clear, and your mind completely clear. And then that all collects in like a big egg, a big white light egg at your heart. All that virtue or merit, benefit from tonight. And then thinking everybody else here in the room, imagine the rays of light go out and enter everybody else and completely bring happiness to them and free them from all mental and physical suffering. So everybody has problems, physical and mental difficulties. So imagine the rays of light completely free them of those difficulties. And so they abide in a happy, peaceful state, free of all problems. And then to your family and friends, even to your enemies, and as we have done each week, to every living being. Imagine all living beings spread out in front of you with the whole range of different problems and sufferings in their lives, misfortunes, unhappinesses. And imagine the rays of light go out to every living being. And in your mind, wishing nothing but happiness and complete freedom from suffering to every living being. And then let that light come back and dissolve back into you, completely absorb back into you. So thank you very much tonight for the questions. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be back next week. So next week I've sort of been moving a little bit through the topic, so next week we'll go to the idea of action. And this Sunday coming, I'm doing a one-day course here called Make the Switch from unhappiness to happiness. So it'll be similar to this, but a little bit different. So I'm just working through some different topics. So from 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock. You can book in through the office, so it'd be great to see some of you there. So thank you.